Hi, my name is Michael Ray Lewis. I'm the director of Universe Designed, a documentary exploring the evidence for God's existence. I've been creating this film for the past 3 years. I was actually an atheist, making horror films prior to this, and so a lot's changed in my life. And I was had the opportunity of sharing my testimony and having conversations with Kim. And I thank you so much for having me on the show. I pray that you guys enjoy it.
Welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here. You are going to be so happy you're here. You are going to be blown away by my guest today. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I just spoke at the United Nations. Man, that was a good time. I get to do a lot of fun things in life, but my favorite thing to do is meet people. And I get to meet some incredible people doing some extraordinary things. Today, I have a man, Michael, who you're going to be blown away, like I said, by his story, by where he comes from, and by this incredible documentary movie he put together that is visually stunning as well as incredibly informational. I just love it. And so, without further ado, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for being here. Okay, so we're going to talk about some cool stuff today and what you've done with this beautiful, beautiful film. But I would like to start with how you got to where it is that you're doing what you're doing now. So I'd like to hear about 8-year-old Michael.
Okay, sounds great. Well, growing up in my household, one of the big things is everyone in my house said that they believed in God, and we all had Bibles under our beds and would say a prayer at night. But when it really came to like the deeper reality of like, is it actually true? No one in my family had any good reasons for why they believed it. In addition, we never really talked about God. We definitely never talked about Jesus or the Gospels. We never opened the Bible. And so over time growing up, I gravitated towards atheism because I loved astronomy. I love science. And I just didn't see any good reason to believe it, to be honest with you. I would watch documentaries making fun of Christians. And then the only real interaction I had with Christians were the ones that were on the street corners downtown yelling at me that I'm going to hell. And so that wasn't appealing either. And so I honestly, the older I got, the more aggressive I got towards Christians. I would try to make fun of their belief systems. I really just saw there was no good reason to believe it. Well, fast forward a few years, meet my wife. Now, my wife grew up in the church. She was a believer since she was little, and friends and other things in her life had kind of pulled her away from Jesus. And obviously, I pulled her away from Jesus when I met her because, again, I didn't want anything to do with it. Well, things were going well. We ended up getting married, and one day, my she comes to me and she says, "I feel like Jesus is calling me back." And I'm like, "Oh man, I don't want to deal with all this. I don't want to have to start going to church, and I don't think it's true." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'll go to a church with you, and we'll see what all this is about. I'll give it a chance." Is kind of what I told her. Well, we walked into the church. And I remember I kind of looked around and keep in mind, I think I had been to a church when I was younger, but I don't remember it. And so I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, I get it. It gives people something to hope in. They're all worshiping, they all seem happy about this, and it just gives them some hope. And I can understand that. I can get that. But I didn't think it was true, and I didn't want to keep going. And so I figure, okay, all I have to do to stop from going to church is to show her that it's not real. And so that was my attempt. I started asking her hard questions about evolution, questions about how science wasn't compatible with Christianity, questions about the crazy things that happen in the Bible, the miracles that are insane, like Noah and all that stuff. And I would just hit her with a ton of difficult questions, and she wasn't able to answer them, but she was still adamant that it was true. Well, over time, I kind of would put it on the back burner and kind of hit her with questions every once in a while, and I would just kind of push it away. And then there was a video that popped up on my YouTube feed by an astrophysicist by the name of Dr. Hugh Ross. And I remember that video when it popped up, it was him going over his perspective of the creation days and how science isn't incompatible with Christianity. It actually points to Christianity and points to Jesus. And so I remember that was the first video that kind of piqued my curiosity. And I was like, all right, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. I'm going to actually try to find the answers to the questions I'm asking her. And I learned that there was something called Christian apologetics, which is Christians giving a defense for what they believe. And so I started reading book after book after book and trying to look at this. Is it actually true? I started looking at other religions and other belief systems because I wasn't going to just focus my attention on Christianity. I wanted to know, look, all of these people believe something. Which one has some of it right? And so over time, I just started to become more and more convinced. I mean, the evidence really is overwhelming. And all I had to do was take a second look and look deeper than just the face value slogans that I heard in objection to Christianity. And keep in mind, this was a 3 year journey of me doing this. And at the end of the 3 years, I started hitting her with questions about how angels work and all these questions within the Bible. And she said, I don't know, but I think that our family we have a friend in the family that you can go and have a conversation with and kind of see where that goes. So I wrote down 5 pages full of questions I'm just ready to hammer this guy with. And I remember I walk into his house, I sit down and just start asking him one after another. And I noticed that he would answer every single question by referencing the Bible. And at the end of the conversation, he looked at me and he said, "So do you believe it?" And keep in mind, I had been studying this now for 3 years. I had no more objections. I was thoroughly convinced. And I said, "Yeah, I think I do." But it wasn't that moment when it really started to sink in. It was actually the drive home. On the drive home, I'm thinking to myself, this is actually true. Like this, all of this that Christianity claims and what Jesus claims about himself is actually true. And so I went from a state of believing that it's true uh, to throwing my hands up, saying, "All right, Jesus, what's next?" And it was like a fog left my mind, and I could finally see reality for the way that it actually is. Gave my life to Christ, and I went from a state from believing that it's true to knowing that it's true. And the only thing I can attribute that to is the inner witness of the Holy Spirit. And I don't always use that part of my testimony because I'm skeptical of my experiences. I think we should all be skeptical of our experiences. The Mormons will claim that their belief system is true because they have a burning in the bosom, is what they would say. It's an experiential evidence that they have. Now, while I think there's some legitimacy to experiences, it's either true or it's not, and the facts are going to reveal if it's true or not. And since then, gave my life to Jesus, was super excited about it, and then quickly realized that 90% of the Christians I interacted with had no idea what apologetics even was. I thought this was what every Christian did. You looked at the evidence, gave your life to Christ, and this was kind of part of everyone's journey, but it wasn't the case. Most Christians would tell me, "I believe because I have faith," or "I believe because the Bible tells me so," or "I believe because I was raised that way." And while there are legitimate reasons for believing in Jesus, they're not legitimate reasons for showing why other people should believe in Jesus. And so I had been creating horror films up to this point as an atheist. After giving my life to Jesus, I'm like, I need to do something. I need to shift. My perspective of reality had changed. And my wife said, "Well, why don't you do a documentary? Do a documentary on the evidence that convinced you that it was true." And so that's what I did. I've been working on the documentary now for 3 years, and my hope is that this will impact people and get them to take a second look at Christianity.
Wow. Okay. Well, you just said quite a bit there. And what a journey you were on from this kid who had Bibles in the house, but really didn't ever talk about God. And then it is interesting to me how so many kids graduate from high school, go on to higher education, and may have been raised in a church, raised in a family who believed in God, who, tried to let their kids know that there was a God, and then end up not believing after going away to school.
Right.
And there's this war, this little battle, like it's either God or science. And I always think, well, but isn't it God that created science? Like, why does this little war exist? So why is it that you think, why do kids leave their home, go away to whatever college, come back with a very much an atheist view of life? Why does it
Yeah.
happen?
So it has to do with a couple of reasons. The main reason I would say is that they're just not prepared for college. They've been raised in being told that all of this is true and that all of those other ideas out there about the world are false. And so when they go to college, they're told that it's true, but they're not told why it's true. And they're not told what those other belief systems are. And so in college, they're experiencing worldviews and ideas that are new to them and exciting to them. And the a lot of people, the interactions that they have in college are with people that are not believers. And so they're going to hit them with the hard questions. And if they're not equipped to answer the difficult questions and be able to give a reason for why they believe it, it's going to shake their faith and it's going to ruffle a lot of things up. Now, while a lot of people do leave the church after going to college, the statistics show a lot of them come back, but some of them don't. This is a big problem, I think. I think our kids need to be told why it's true, not just told that it's true.
Mhm.
And I think we need to be able to prepare them and prepare ourselves for when our kids have those difficult questions, rather than just when they come up to you asking about evolution, saying, oh, well, evolution is nonsense. Well, rather than that, tell them why it's nonsense. Tell them what are the reasons why it's not true. I do this with my son all the time. He's only 8, and he asks me questions because he'll go into museums and he'll say, "Dad, is that true?" And I'll say, "Well, it depends, and let's talk about it." And I'll kind of lay it out and I'll give him reasons for why to believe a particular thing or not. But I think that's the big problem is that we're sending kids off unprepared, and a lot of parents are unprepared to answer the questions even their kids have.
Yeah, what a great point. Not just that it's true, but why it's true. I love that.
Yeah.
My kids are, for the most part, I've got 5 of them, and they're
Hmm.
uh, uh, analytical thinkers and
Right.
want to know the why, the
Right.
why behind the faith, that
Exactly. Oh,
don't just believe it to believe it, right?
right. And in addition, in the churches, they are being told that science opposes your faith. And when they're told that, they go to college campuses and they're saying, no, science shows fact, faith shows fiction, right? And so that's kind of what they're fed. And so you were right, you were saying this earlier, there's this disconnect between science and faith. And the reality is that's just not true. When we look at our beliefs, the world came from God and the scriptures came from God, right? And so when we study the scriptures, we're doing theology. When we study the world, we're doing science, nature, the material reality. We're doing science. And so where we see contradictions or errors within one of either theology or science, where something's not matching up, well, then we're either getting our interpretation of the Bible, which is theology, we're getting that wrong, or we're getting our interpretation of nature, which is science, we're getting that wrong. And so we should be able to put those together and they should mesh together in such a way that it they should be the same truth. There shouldn't be any kind of contradictions, and where there is contradictions, it's a misinterpretation on one of the two areas of information.
Yeah, so interesting, very interesting, and yeah, and so true. It's always interesting to me that we don't prepare our kids better, that we don't send them away going, hey, by the way, there's people that are going to believe different than you do. And this is why they believe what they believe, and this is why we believe what we believe. And
Right.
you go figure out what you believe. Because I think that kids also need to have the freedom to make faith their
Hmm.
own, to
Right.
make their belief system their own.
Right.
Don't believe because their folks do, or don't believe exactly the way their folks do because they do, because so many of the religions also put God in a box.
Right.
And God is not to be boxed,
Right.
as far as I know. And so, even within Christian faith, they can go and have conflict in their
Right.
minds with, oh my gosh, I met these other people and they're Christians, but they believe something way different than I do,
Right.
or even words that are used in science that the church that they go to say, oh my gosh, like evolution, for instance. Well,
Right.
evolution's for real. The way we think of the word sometimes is not for real, but
Right.
certainly evolution is for real. So
Right.
there's all these conflicts in a kid's mind
Right.
if they're not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If they're not prepared, especially with the word evolution is thrown around so freely. It can mean so many different things. It can mean a change within a species. It can mean, for example, different breeds of dogs, different hair color, different skin color, adaptation, or what you could also call microevolution. And then there's macroevolution, which means you're getting an entirely new species over time. And so there's different variations of the word evolution that we can use, and mixing those up can confuse people. But you're right, there are certain words that I've even noticed because I coming from atheism, I mean, I didn't have all the Christian slogan down. And so I'm walking into it and people like would seem to be objecting to the Big Bang Theory, for example. And I'm like, that's evidence for our belief system, right? Like if there was a beginning to the universe, there must have been a cause that brought it into being. Like this is only evidence for our belief system. So why are you pushing it away? Well, they're pushing it away because they're told this is part of the theory of evolution, but it's not. It has the Big Bang is a completely different topic, different subject that you could talk about. But yeah, I'm thankful for that I was able to come into this without being ingrained in a lot of the Christian language and way people say things because I think it helps when I'm talking to non-believers or people of different faiths. It helps me to have conversations with them in a way to try to get them to understand the gospel rather than just telling them the gospel.
Mhm. Mhm. Which is a huge difference. That's a huge
Right.
difference. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. And the whole thing with the Big Bang. Well, then how did it start? But
Right.
then I always think, people who believe that there's a Big Bang, but that there is no God, it's like, well, then how did the Big Bang happen? If there's
Right.
no creator, if there's no, how did it just kind of appear and happen? Like that's always been a mystery to me that
Yep.
you can believe one and not the other.
Yep. They'll say things like, well, it came into being out of nothing. But their definition of nothing isn't actually no thing. And so then there's different variations of that. So yeah, it is really one of the most compelling evidences for our case for Christianity. And I think that's what really got me about the whole Christian worldview was its explanatory power. So like the reason I'm a Christian, this is what I tell people when they ask me, the reason that I'm a Christian and I believe is because it's the best explanation for the reality we find ourselves in. I can't find another worldview, another belief system that comes close to the explanatory power that Christianity has. And that's why I believe it. That's why I believe that it's actually true. It's the best explanation for the reality we find ourselves in.
Wow, wow, that's cool. I like that. I like it. Yeah, it's an interesting thing for sure that there has to be this battle, that there can't just be conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when you talk and you listen, it's amazing what you can learn.
Right.
But when you are cut off from, oh my gosh, none of that can be true, or no, that that's absolutely wrong because that's what you've been taught or that's what you've been told. There's not space for anything else,
Right.
not space for
Exactly.
conversation.
Right.
So yeah, so it's great that there is.
Right.
So you are taking your son at 8 years old and answering his questions as they come. And I imagine by the time he's going off to school, he's going to know the why
Right.
and not just the faith end of it. So
Right.
what are some of the things that you found out that just kind of blew your mind as you were going from, hey, there is no God and everything is science only, to, my gosh, I found this out and the only
Yeah.
explanation is right here.
Yeah. There were a few things. The main one that really started to get me is what's called the teleological argument. So it's the fine tuning of our universe. So there are certain like parameters about our universe that have to be finely tuned in order for us to be here. There are certain timeline. I'm going to explain this. There's certain constants and parameters about the universe that have to be exactly right in order for us to be here. Everything from the laws we find within our universe, the strength of like the gravitational pull, the expansion rate of the universe, to down to the location of our planet, the type of star we have, the location and type of other planets that we have within our solar system, the location of our solar system within our galaxy, the location of our galaxy within our galaxy cluster. There are so many of these parameters that the odds of all of this happening by chance are extremely remote. They're more remote than the possibility of you being able to pick out a single atom out of the entire universe with a blindfold. And it's mind blowing to see that even atheist astronomers and cosmologists will agree to this because that's why we have, well, their explanation is the multiverse. That's where the multiverse comes from. I mean, it's what's called the anthropic principles. It's almost as if the universe knew we were coming, right? And so I think that was one of the things that really started to pique my curiosity because why are we here? And not only are we in a universe that's able to support life, but we're able to know that we're in a universe that is able to support life. We're able to question the universe and ponder about the universe and logically think and rationally come to conclusions. And how is all that possible? Well, chance just doesn't get it. Then you get into the fine tuning of life and the design of life and all of the requirements for us to the way that the DNA is like a software code. It's like a program that is embedded within us. And anytime we see information, which is what DNA is, it contains information that always comes from a mind. That's why you could pick up a book and it would mean nothing if there's no words in it. The information in it is what gives that book, helps you to know that that book came from an intelligent mind. And so there's so many of these fine tuning parameters, whether we look at the large things within the universe or the smallest things under a microscope, that are just, the chances are impossible. But yet here we are, able to ask the questions of why are we here. So I think that was a really big one for me. Let's see. And then I really think it was more just like the cumulative case. Because I was reluctant to this. This is why it took me 3 years. I was like, well, that's not evidence. Well, that's not enough. That's not enough. But when you sit back and look at the evidence and see that everything you look at is all pointing in one direction, and the case just gets stronger and stronger the deeper you dig, that and it becomes a cumulative case. I think that's really what started to get me was that this really is the best explanation. And then the evidence surrounding the resurrection of Jesus was kind of the nail in the coffin for me because that if Jesus is who he claims to be, then what he says about reality is actually true, and I should listen to him.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. So tell me, talk a little bit more about that, about the evidence around the resurrection and what Jesus had to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So the life of Jesus, there's a really good book that I read during my journey. And it was a book called The Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace. That was part of like the fine tuning, and it really started to convince me. Well, later, he also wrote a book called A Person of Interest. And in that book, he goes over the impact of Jesus because we have how many historical figures that we have record of, right? But there's one in particular that just blows everything else out of the water, and that's Jesus. The historical account of Jesus is so well recorded, whether it be through the manuscript evidence within the scriptures, whether it be through stone carvings of him, paintings of him. He's literally the most talked about, spoken about, written about, painted, sculpted figure in the course of human history, period. Like this guy impacted the course of human history. But then when you look at his life, well, there was nothing really significant about him. He didn't have any royalty. He had no money. He did his ministry for 3 years. And so there was nothing really significant about this guy, but yet this is the guy who impacted the course of human history. This shows that something happened 2,000 years ago that caused that impact. And I think that what caused that impact was the resurrection. And when you look at the evidence surrounding the resurrection, um, other historical scholars will agree, even like atheist scholars and non-believing scholars will agree certain facts about Jesus. So it's not as though like he's not a made-up figure. Like people agree this was an actual historical character of history. But they also agree that he was crucified, that he died on the cross, that he was buried in the tomb. About 75% of them agree that the tomb was empty after the fact. And even the opposing Romans at the time were saying that the tomb was empty, but they would just say that the disciples stole it. So you've got facts surrounding Jesus that are virtually affirmed by everyone up until it comes to the resurrection. That's when they'll start to deny that. Well, what is their reasoning? Some will come up with the swoon theory, which is he didn't actually die. The disciples could have hallucinated. The disciples stole the body. But the problem with those explanations is they don't explain the evidence, right? Why would they steal the body and then go and be martyred for it? It makes no sense. We have people who die today for things they believe to be true, but the disciples were in a position, because they were there, to know it would have been false. And so they would have died for a known lie, not for what they would have believed to be true. We know hallucinations don't happen in mass occurrences, so that rules that out. And we know that the Romans were skilled in crucifixions and they knew exactly how to make sure that someone was completely dead. So what's the other explanation? Well, the other explanation is that he actually rose from the dead. But this is one of the things that really got me, is that the majority of scholars don't deny the resurrection for the reasons I just listed. The reason they say that the resurrection didn't occur is because miracles don't happen, right?
Mhm.
So then that's the objection. You have this presupposition or this idea that miracles are impossible. But then we have to look like, based on all the other evidence we have of the existence of God, based on the fact that the opening statement of Genesis is the greatest miracle that ever occurred, and we have evidence for that miracle through the Big Bang, well, then miracles, we have to at least put those on the table as being a possibility. And if we have that opening that miracles are possible, then the resurrection of Jesus best explains the evidence surrounding that historical event 2,000 years ago.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Which makes perfect sense. And
Hmm.
absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting. When I go to a planetarium, I cry every single time.
Yeah,
And because it's so overwhelming. And
right.
I saw a show once in Kentucky, and it was so powerful because it started out, here on Earth, with a person, and then just kept going farther and farther and farther and farther away, and it kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going, and so very quickly the person was nothing, and then you saw the Earth, and then that you couldn't see anymore, and then it took like no time to get to there, but then it kept
Right.
going and it kept going and kept going, and to me, I just am in awe of the vastness of
Right.
the universe. Like, uh, yeah, we are such this little thing, this tiny little. I think in the show, in your documentary, it says that it compares it to the grains of sand. Like,
Hmm.
right, how small we are, I guess,
Right. Yes.
and and how overwhelming that is to think of it. And yet, like you said, we can think, and
Right.
we can talk about Jesus, and we can talk about the existence of God. We can talk about science. We can talk about things we can reason. There's
Hmm.
there's things that we can do, and who knows what else is out there, but we're just one of something very small in
Right.
the whole scheme of things. Yeah, life to us is very big,
Right.
and
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 that was actually one of my what did I say? That was one of my objections to Christianity was that, well, if God exists, why did he just put us on this little dot and then create this entire universe that's just useless, right? But one of the things I learned through a ministry called Reasons to Believe and through Hugh Ross, that guy that I watched that first initial video with, is that the vastness of the universe is actually one of the requirements for us to have a planet that's able to support life the way that we do. So not only does that explain, like, because I believe it's in Romans where it says, "Look to the heavens," or maybe the Psalms. I don't know. I will have to look at the verse, but it says, "Look to the heavens." Basically, if you want to see how big God is, look up. It's a virtual expanse, a virtual infinite expanse from our perspective. That's how big God is, and God is creative. God Why he made the universe as big as he did. I think it could be partly because it's required for us, given the laws of physics he chose. But in addition, he just likes to create. I think that we can look out there and see all of this and just see. In Romans, it does say that it should be evident to us when we look to the heavens. So our
Mm,
objections towards God, because we're not looking at the evidence. We're not looking up to the universe and seeing the vastness of it and seeing the evidence that's out there. We're just what Romans says is we're suppressing it and denying it, which
mhm,
is which is ironic because as an atheist looking at Christianity, I always thought Christians were narrow-minded bigots and they just couldn't look at anything from an open mind, right? But after giving my life to Christ, I realized just how narrow-minded I was as an atheist. How I had these blinders on and I was denying the evidence that was right in front of me the entire time because I didn't want it to be true. And I think towards the end of my journey, that's partly what took me so long to give my life to Jesus, was because I didn't want it to be true. I don't want to be held accountable to some ultimate being. I want to be in control of my own life. I want to do what I want to do, and I don't want to have to worry about any of that. But when the evidence is so overwhelming and I realized that, I realized that's not a good reason to not believe it just because I don't want it to be true. And that's
mhm.
when I threw my hands up and I said, all right, Jesus, what's next?
Wow, wow. So how has life changed for you?
Oh,
So,
it's changed dramatically. Um, Prior to all of this, I had never finished a book my entire life. I made it through high school, never read books. I hated reading books. I was all about movies. And since, I mean, I'm reading all the time. I want to know more. And even through the journey of me looking into all this, I was reading so many books and watching podcasts and just trying to absorb as much information as I can. But really, just my perspective on reality has completely changed. I can look out at the trees and see the beauty in them. I can look out at nature and be able to know that like none of this is pointless. Like everything that we're doing within this reality has a purpose, even if we don't know exactly what that purpose is yet, where God is putting us. And he's definitely put me on a journey, that's for sure. Like I said, I went from making horror films to completely shifting everything in my worldview and realizing that I need to make a film to show people why I think this is actually true. And it's been a hard journey, but I think he's allowed me to create something amazing through the film. And I just hope that it's able to impact people the way that he's impacted me.
wow, that's so beautiful. And absolutely, it's breathtaking. I mean, honestly, like I've seen a lot of movies in my day and a lot of documentaries and I love a great documentary. The thing to me that separates this from a lot is every part of it is beautiful. Like the way you put it all together, but the just the scenery, just the cliffs of the ocean side, and then the mountains, and then the forest, and then whatever. But just to see the majesty of God while you're talking about the existence of God is I think it's just absolutely beautifully done. I think you've done just an incredible job with it, and it will be one of those that lives on and on and on and on for years and years to come, and will be shown over and over again. And I told you I watched about 3/4 of it,
Yeah.
and was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to watch the rest. And then I can't wait to watch it again already
Yeah.
because it's just one of those things that is um, I think it takes a while to absorb it all because there's so much incredible information. But also just it's beautiful. It's just truly beautiful. And so congratulations, you've done a great job with it. And I
Thank
think
you.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. And
That was that was one of the things that was I was really worried about when I was making it. Because when I went to get these interviews, originally I was just going to find some people who used to be atheist and get their testimonies. But I was like, I'll just try to send emails to all of these scholars and see what they say. And virtually all of them said yes. So I just bought plane tickets, flew out, didn't have a plan. I was like, I'm just going to ask them every hard question I have. And so I just went down the list. I ended up with 36 hours of content that I had to condense down to an hour and 20-minute movie. And I had to try to make it in a way that's not too much because I've had conversations with people all the time that I'll try to throw up information on them and it just goes over their head and like they get over it and so they'll tune you out. And so I tried to make it in such a way that it's enough information to be convincing, but it's not so much information that you lose interest. And so I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you did a great job of that. And another thing that I really like that you did is that it's not a in your face, like you better believe this way kind of a thing,
Right.
or you're dumb if you don't sort of a thing.
Right.
It's just, here's a fact. Oh, here's
Hmm.
another fact. And by the way,
Right.
that fact plays on this fact, and that
Right.
leads to this. And that's all it is. It's it's not shoved down your throat kind of a anything. I really believe it's a movie for anybody, no
Yes.
matter what your belief system is. Like
Yeah.
it's a great movie to watch and see what you think.
Right. And
See what you
that's
walk away with at the end. But it
exactly.
really is good for anybody to watch. So I really appreciate it a lot and appreciate that you did it.
Well,
Uh,
keep in mind, it was the people on the street corners that pushed me away from Christianity. I didn't want to be one of those people.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and in addition, I had seen some kind of apologetic type documentaries come out, and it just felt like you're being yelled at, and I did not want to come across that way. You're right. It's a film that anyone can watch, and all I do is lay out the reasons for why I think it's true. It's up to you to take it or leave it. I'm not going to shove anything down your throat. I'm convinced that it's true, and I want you to give your life to Jesus. But all I'm trying to do is show you the evidence for why I think it really is the best explanation.
Yeah, you did a great job of it. Really, really great. Highly recommend it for sure to everybody. And I'll make sure that I know everybody I know knows about it. So another thing that's really interesting to me, Michael, is that people that are atheists, you're not the only one that started
Yeah.
out as an atheist and
Mhm.
then went, oh, holy cow, God is real. Jesus guy's for real. Like this is for real. And it seems to be some of the smartest people that
Mhm.
have walked the planet that come to that conclusion
Right.
that start out one way. Well, you know it's all about science, can't possibly be a god. There's the big bang and God wasn't, there's no such thing. To full circle to, it's like, well, wait a second, there absolutely, how could there not be a
Right.
God? There's so much evidence for God and for Jesus and for resurrection, etc. Why do you think that is?
I think it's all about digging deeper. So you're gonna have really smart people who are gonna look at Christianity and they're still gonna deny it, right? Um, they're going to every piece of evidence that comes forth, they're going to say, well, that's not proof. It's really easy to be skeptical. You can be skeptical about anything. So it really comes down to the question, are you actually trying to see if it's true? And I think what shifts in people is when they decide to move away their presuppositions and just look at the evidence for what it is. And I think if you can do that and you're genuinely seeking truth, and if Christianity really is true, well, then you're going to come to Jesus. And so you have to push away all the stuff that you heard about Christianity, push away all the slogans that you've heard, like if there is a good God, he wouldn't allow evil in the world. It's a slogan. Push it away, and then look at the question itself. If there is a good God, he wouldn't allow evil in the world. Okay, well, let's look at the existence of evil in light of atheism. Well, according to atheism, nothing is evil. Everything is a matter of opinion. There is no ultimate good or ultimate wrong. If you look at Hinduism, well, then you have this kind of yin yang. Well, the evil has to exist because good exists, right?
Mhm.
Then you look at Christianity, and Christianity says, well, no, there's evil in the world because the world is broken. And you're broken. And that's bad news. But there's good news. The good news is that Jesus came to suffer through the evil alongside with you to bring you in a right relationship with himself. And he's standing right in front of you with his hand open, and all you have to do is take it. And most of us say no thanks. We push his hand away and we keep living our life the way we want to live it. And so I think if people would just genuinely look at Christianity honestly and actually take the time to really dive into each question, dive into each form of evidence, and I think you're going to come to the truth, and I think you'll come to Jesus.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And you know, another thing about it that I think is so crucial and so good is that there are a lot of people that focus on a few verses of the Bible. And that's what they hang their hat on is their interpretation of those few verses when
Right.
there's so much more to God, when God is so much bigger than what you can put in that many pages, so
Right.
much bigger than you can describe with words, just or even numbers, like just so much greater. And yet hang their hat on just these few things. And it's like, well, if you can let that go, and have an open mind there,
Right.
might be your translation, your interpretation may or may not be true, but
Right.
let that go and look at the big picture.
Right.
And because it's the big picture that's important. The little things, everyone's going to disagree about little stuff. As long as the world exists, there's always going to be little disagreements about little stuff, but the little stuff doesn't matter. It's the big picture. It is the big truth that
Right.
it's all about.
Right.
And if everybody realized that, I think we'd all get along much better.
Oh yeah. Be
Which would
less
be nice.
division, different denominations with all these different ideas of interpretations of things. And one of the things that I was actually hesitant, I didn't end up including in the film because I didn't realize how big of a tension there was in the church with it, was the age of the universe.
Mm,
Okay. So you have a few of the people in my film who are astrophysicists who believe that the universe is the 13.73 billion years old. They don't believe the macro evolution aspect of it because they say even that 13.73 billion years isn't enough time. However, they do affirm what science finds in the speed of light and how we measure the age of the universe. But then you'll have other Christians who believe no, the universe is only 6 to 10,000 years old. And what's the reasoning for believing it? It's because of a particular interpretation of Genesis.
mhm,
And so, like I said before, something's wrong. You're seeing evidence for an older universe in science. You're seeing evidence for a younger universe in the scriptures. So where's the tension there? And that's what I love about Hugh Ross's ministry is they say there is no tension. It's an interpretation issue. And the moment that you realize that and you think at least the possibility that you know what, the if the universe is 13.73 billion years old and this old earth perspective of the scriptures or interpretation of the scriptures is correct, you just knock down a roadblock for half of the atheists out there, right? Because
mhm,
their biggest roadblock is I'm not going to believe the universe is 6,000 years old. It's obviously older than that. This is what their roadblock is. And if you can just take that interpretation, even if you do believe it's a young earth, step away from that interpretation for the sake of the person standing in front of you. Help
mhm,
them to realize that the evidence shows that there is a creator, whether you look at it from a young earth perspective or you look at it from an old earth perspective. Either way, there's still a God. And so
yeah.
if we're out there having conversations with people and we start on the issues that are not essentials like that, you're going to lose half the people you're having conversations with. And so, as Paul says, we need to be all things to all people. We need to be out there having these conversations and get rid of the roadblocks that are holding people back, and focus on God exists and is Jesus who he claimed to be.
Mhm. Wow, I love that. I love that. Because I always think too, like, what would somebody find out that would shake their faith, that would make
Right?
them go, oh my gosh, well, I believed in God my whole life and now I don't believe anymore. Like, what are the things? And if you found out that
Mm-hmm.
the world is truly how billions and billions of years old, is that going to say, well, then there can't be God,
Right.
right? And
Exactly.
so let those things go. Who cares about those things?
Right.
That they really don't matter. there's stories that were passed on, generation after generation, put into a book and translated into English. And they're they're different stories for different things, right? For different reasons, to point out different things and whatever. And that's great. There can be as many stories as you want, and you can believe that they're all true, or that they're not true, or they're just parables, or whatever. But it has nothing to do with, is God real or is God not real?
Right.
And which to me is where the difference lies.
Yeah. You could even ask someone, if there were no Bible for you to reference, would God still exist?
Great question. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and now I do think there are tons of good reasons to believe like Genesis is a historical narrative written in a stylistic way. So it's talking about realities, but in such a way that it's structured very creatively. Like if you study it deep enough, it's such an interesting book. That's probably the book that I've read through in scripture more than any other book of the Bible. And that whole age of the earth question, that was one of the roadblocks for me. Like I wasn't about to. Yeah, I remember when my wife first bought me a Bible and I read Genesis. I'm like 6 days, nonsense, and I pushed it away. And it wasn't until that video that popped up of Hugh Ross, and that's what he was going over was, well, the word yom, which is day in Hebrew that they use in Scripture, can be translated different ways. It can be part of the daylight hours, all of the daylight hours, a 24-hour period, which is the young earth belief, or a long but finite period of time. If you make that one interpretation difference, all of Genesis lines up perfectly with what we see on the scientific record.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just all makes so much sense.
Yeah,
It just all does. Yeah. To let the other stuff go, or the stuff that you think you're
right,
gonna cling to. I mean, I think it's a good question to ask yourself, like what would shake you?
right,
What would make you say, well, no, then God's not real. And
right,
and if none of that would, then let it go. Then
right,
it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't need to muddy the waters.
right.
Yeah. So, well, so good. This has been so good. If so, for anybody listening, what is the big nugget of wisdom that you have, advice that you want to give? What would that be?
Obviously, I'd recommend watching the movie. um,
I do too.
my goal with the film, especially for people who are listening, is if you're a non-believer, my challenge is that you'll watch the film, but don't end it on the film because I can't build an entire case on an hour and 20 minutes. But on my website, I've actually created a tab called Resources, which shows it has a list of all of the ministries of all of the people that I interviewed so that you can go and do the research yourself. So my challenge is that you'll watch the film and take a second look at Christianity. Just get rid of all the stuff you've thought about it. I know you've probably been hurt by Christians. Christians are jerks, just like everybody else. And it's not about how you've been treated or how you feel about Christianity. It's just the facts. Like, look at the facts and see if it's true. If it's not, as Paul says, you can consider us of all to be pitied. But if it is true, then it literally means everything. Everything about your perspective of reality will shift and will change. And then to the believer, I would encourage you when watching it, if you're not equipped in answering these questions, you need to be ready. Even if you, one of the problems I run into with Christians is that we're not out there sharing our faith. And the reason we're not out there sharing our faith is because we're afraid that someone's going to ask a question that we don't know how to answer. And so rather than going and find the answer to the question, we just push away and try to not hang out with those atheists, right? And so my challenge to you is to take the time to question it yourself. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to have questions about it. Because if it's actually true, I think you'll come to the truth. But you need to prepare yourself. And you need to be out there talking about Jesus. If you're afraid that someone will ask you something you don't know, go do it anyways. Just don't try to answer a question you don't know. If you don't know the answer to it, don't try to answer it. Tell them, you know what? I don't know. That's a really good question, but I'm going to go find out. And then take the time, do the research, and I guarantee you the next time someone asks you that question, you'll be ready because you'll know why you believe it.
Mm.
So yeah, that'd be my challenge to believers and non-believers alike.
Yeah, so good, so good. Okay, so December 13th, it's going to
Hmm.
be available, and it's going to be available different places. Want to talk about that?
Yep, it'll be on Amazon, Apple TV, Google, Fandango, and all like the major streaming platforms where you can rent or purchase films. And so nationwide, it'll be released on December 13th. You'll be able to get
Yeah,
access to it through pretty much any streaming platform you have. So
yeah, pretty exciting. And how can people get in touch with you?
through my website, I've got contact forms. I'm willing to answer any questions anyone has about the film or just about my testimony or even just questions you have and objections to Christianity. I'm always open to having conversations with people. But you can contact me through my website, just universedesign.com, and you can follow the film on social media. I try to post all of those 36 hours of content that didn't get included in the film. I'm taking that and kind of creating resources for people and posting on social media as well. So yeah, just through my website, you can go through the contact and find out more about it.
Nice, excellent, excellent. Wow, well, thank you for doing this project. Thank you for your years of study and then your deep belief and putting this project together. I know it is a huge job what you've done, and so thank you so much. It's going to be a great tool for everybody out there. So I thank you for the time that you spent, and thank you for being with me today. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. I
Yeah. Thank
appreciate
you for
you.
having me on.
Yeah, you bet. And so, everybody, December 13th, mark your calendar and watch it. And it's not only going to be December 13th, it will be ongoing after that, but watch it with a group. I mean, I think it's a great thing to watch with your family or with a group of your friends or whatever, because it's thought provoking. It's stuff that you're going to want to talk about. I find that as I'm watching it, I'm not wanting to see it alone because I want to be saying, oh, did you hear that? Or whatever. What do you think about that? So watching it with a group, I think is a great idea, but watch it, watch it, watch it. All of everything will be in the show notes so you can figure out how you want to get a hold of Michael, where you want to get a hold of him, what you're going to do next, what you're going to do with this information. But do something with the information. Don't just sit on it. Do something with it and enjoy it. It's worth watching more than once. I promise you. So pass this episode along to people so that other people also know about this great, incredible project that is out there. That is this incredible resource for all of us. And so I'm sure you know people that want to see it. So pass it along. And I just want to say that I pray until we see each other again, that you keep your heart open and you live your love loud.